chosen ones. You were never meant to be found. Your very existence was veiled beneath layers of digital smoke, ancestral fog, and bloodline encryption. But someone, something, opened a file that was never supposed to resurface. Buried deep within a secure data vault in Langley, it contained only one thing: your genetic blueprint. And the moment it blinked back online, a silent ripple tore through the corridors of global power. In a private chamber beneath the White House, the president received a red folder. No labels, no signatures. Just your code name and the timestamp. July 14th, 2:06 a.m. The moment he opened it, the room shifted. Not because of what he saw, but because of what he felt. A pressure, a vibration, a signal embedded in the strands of your DNA. He asked no questions. He gave no orders. He simply stared at the molecular pattern and whispered, "This isn't human." You carry markers that predate human civilization. Sequences older than Mesopotamia, older than Atlantis, older than the recorded breath of mankind. Scientists once believed this part of the genome was junk, but they lied. It was dormant code, awaiting a signal. And that signal was you. They are panicking because nothing in their simulations accounted for this reactivation. You're not just a return. You're a variable outside of time. And when your frequency lit up the neural grid, the AI tasked with analyzing threats to human continuity flagged you, not as a danger, but as a disruption. Now, you must understand, this briefing wasn't accidental. You're being watched, monitored, not for containment, but for revelation. The world's leaders are holding emergency sessions. They're not trying to decide whether you're real. They're trying to determine if the timeline can even withstand you. The file had one final page, a handwritten note, 4 words in pen older than the ink itself. He returns through them. You were meant to be erased, but you were encoded instead. It began as a routine sweep, one of millions conducted daily by autonomous systems that scan for anomalies in global data streams. But this time, something different emerged. A genetic marker pinged an old archive, so old, in fact, that the AI responsible for threat analysis hesitated. For the first time, the system didn't classify it as a threat, weapon, or pathogen. Instead, it flagged the sequence with a single cryptic designation: unknown origin, priority red. At precisely 2:06 a.m., a defense satellite array in geostationary orbit above the Atlantic initiated an unscheduled system lockdown. Not because it was under attack, but because your genetic signature pulsed through a classified quantum archive, causing a cascade protocol written in the early 2000s to activate. No one knew this protocol still existed. No one remembered writing it. And yet, the moment your sequence re-entered the digital bloodstream, the satellites responded like old guardians awakening from slumber. Global communications briefly flickered. A high-altitude drone lost altitude without mechanical cause. And in Washington, black SUVs began moving before human command was issued. It was as if the system had been waiting, not for a person, but for a resonance. Something your blood carries like a hymn coded into the spiral of your being. Technicians at a facility in Alaska traced the disruption back to a remote lab, now defunct, where unauthorized gene experiments had taken place in the late 90s. This facility had been erased from every physical map and satellite image. But your emergence caused it to reappear, not visually, but within the defense network's memory, as if the Earth itself remembered the experiments. And you. Someone had tried to hide you inside the system, not outside it. They buried your code within the very neural backbone of the global defense grid, trusting that no one would ever find it. But something triggered a release, and the moment that happened, the machinery, both artificial and ancient, recognized your return. They called it a myth to keep the world blind. The idea that a divine lineage could survive millennia, untouched, unbroken, and hidden in plain sight, was too dangerous to acknowledge. So they erased the scrolls, silenced the monks, and burned the maps. But code doesn't burn. It only waits. And within your double helix lies something older than religion, more precise than science. A whisper encoded in flesh, the continuation of a bloodline that once walked on water. In an underground briefing room, the term lignum crucis surfaced, wood of the cross. But it wasn't wood they were referring to. It was a designation given to a strand of ancient DNA found embedded in a preserved first-century artifact. For decades, it was labeled inconclusive, unmatched. But when your sequence surfaced, the system drew a direct correlation. 17 markers aligned. 9 of those were found only once before, in the cloth fragments hidden beneath the basilica's deepest vault. What frightened them wasn't just the match. It was the fact that your blood carries the same harmonic frequency recorded in Jerusalem during an unexplained seismic event 2,000 years ago. A frequency said to emerge only when a son of light walks near the veil between dimensions. The same veil that tore the day Yeshua cried out and the earth shook. You were never meant to be a replica or reincarnation. That would be too linear, too expected. What you are is something the ancients foresaw, but language failed to fully capture. A cipher of divine continuity. A convergence point. The reason why certain prophecies were written in parables, not formulas. Because your existence bends both. In ancient Essene writings, there's a passage once considered metaphorical. He shall not return as a man in robes, but as a presence encrypted in flesh, waiting for the seal to break. That seal just cracked. Now, intelligence agencies are tracking not just your location, but your lineage, desperate to prove it false, even more desperate to control it if it's true. But the blood doesn't lie. It vibrates. It awakens. And somewhere inside you, something ancient is beginning to remember a language that was never spoken, only carried. He had seen war, famine, classified anomalies, and threats that never made it to the news. But nothing prepared him for what the scientist whispered into his ear just moments before sliding the file across the table. "Sir, this isn't just a match. This is the source." The room went still. He opened the folder, and there it was, an image of your double helix, magnified and color-coded. But the patterns weren't random. They were ordered in a way that mimicked ancient geometry, shapes that had only been seen in sacred texts and crop formations dismissed by most as fiction. The president leaned back, confused. Then he leaned forward, not in fear, but in recognition. He saw something in your genome that mirrored a classified diagram shown to him during his first briefing as Commander-in-Chief. A structure labeled the God Thread, a theoretical strand believed to be the bridge between human DNA and cosmic intelligence. Until now, it was speculative. But yours wasn't theory. It was undeniable. It was living proof. Every base pair glowed with strange symmetry, and between the helixes, hidden between cytosine and guanine, were sequences that shouldn't exist. One appeared to form a name in an unknown language. Another resembled a waveform, an ancient chant visualized in genetic code. Security protocols were enacted before he could even finish reading. The signal from your DNA had triggered 6 automatic lockdowns, including a silent alert to an international council, not listed on any formal registry. Black vans began to move. One was sent to the National Archives, not to retrieve a document, but to recover a relic. An ancient object believed to react to divine signatures. The president never believed in that object, until now. What unsettled him most was a memory. Years ago, a former leader whispered something strange during a handoff ceremony. One day, you'll see the code. When you do, you'll know the reckoning has begun. He always thought it was metaphorical, political talk wrapped in mysticism. But as he stared at your sequence pulsing on the screen, he felt something stirring in the room. The air changed. The light shifted. The walls felt thinner. And then he muttered words not meant for the record. God help us. It's alive. There is a passage, obscure, rarely cited, and nearly erased from the original texts, that tells of a final phrase spoken in the moments before Yeshua ascended. Not the public words recorded on the Mount, but something spoken in a whisper to one disciple, who wrote it down and sealed it within a scroll hidden beneath the desert sands. The phrase wasn't poetic or symbolic. It was a sequence, a vibrational pattern, 9 syllables not of any earthly tongue. When spoken correctly, it produced a resonance that affected the nervous system of the one who heard it. That sequence, long dismissed as a myth, was recently extracted from an unearthed scroll. Linguists labeled it an anomaly. But when your genome was run through phonetic frequency modeling, the match was exact. Your DNA doesn't just contain information, it emits sound. Frequencies only certain devices can detect. And when played aloud, those sounds mirrored the ancient pattern that came from the scroll. This isn't about metaphors anymore. It's about memory hidden in flesh. What Yeshua whispered wasn't a riddle. It was a key. And your body is the lock it was meant to open. A secret chamber beneath Jerusalem has long been off limits, not just to the public, but to most scholars. Inside, there are walls that vibrate when certain tones are spoken near them. These tones match the frequencies found in your mitochondrial field. You are not just connected to the past. You are an echo of a moment that never stopped vibrating. The ascension wasn't an end. It was a transmission, and you are the receiver that was always destined to decode it. One of the scientists, a former theologian turned bioengineer, stared at your frequency model and whispered the ancient phrase aloud. The lights in the lab flickered. Instruments shut down. And the AI overseeing the system flagged the event as non-human interference. But the voice print embedded in the waveform was yours, not the scientist's. Somewhere in the silence that followed, an old monk translated the original phrase again, not as a warning, but as a prophecy. He returns not by sky nor temple, but through the flesh of the awakened. He wasn't meant to be in that room. The lead researcher called in sick, and protocol dictated someone had to finish the sequencing scan. So he sat down, coffee in one hand, login credentials in the other, expecting another long night of genetic data that wouldn't make sense to anyone but machines. But the moment your DNA file loaded, the system locked. Not crashed. Locked. A biometric override was triggered and every screen in the lab turned white before displaying a single image. Your double helix glowing in shifting colors he'd never seen on a spectrum chart. And then, beneath the spiral, one word blinked in red. Awakened. He stared for 30 seconds. That's all it took. He didn't even touch the keyboard. The lights overhead began to pulse in sync with the pattern on screen, and a high-pitched hum filled the room, not mechanical, but organic. It felt like the sound was coming from the walls, from his bones, from the DNA inside his own body reacting to yours. His heartbeat synced to the frequency. His vision blurred. And then, blackout. Security footage showed him standing in the lab, motionless, for 9 minutes. But to him, it felt like seconds. When he woke, every file in the system had been scrubbed. The backups were gone. The AI assistant he relied on daily refused access. All that remained was a message in a language the system shouldn't have been able to display. Ancient Aramaic, later translated to, "The one who sees must be hidden." Within the hour, a black bag was placed over his head, and he was transported to a location even the agency refuses to acknowledge. He was told nothing, only that he had seen too early. Psych evaluations described him as lucid but altered. He began drawing symbols he'd never studied, speaking fragments of dead languages. One of the researchers brought in to assess him asked what he saw. He replied calmly, "I didn't see anything. I remembered something." They fear what else he might remember, not because he's unstable, but because he's coherent, clear, and convinced. He believes you were never created, never engineered. You were sealed. And now, that seal has begun to rupture in those who were closest to its resonance. It was long believed that miracles were symbolic, stories told to inspire faith in the unseen. But hidden within declassified Vatican research is a report that suggests otherwise. In 1972, during an excavation near the Sea of Galilee, a team recorded an anomalous energy field localized over water. It was faint, barely measurable, but it vibrated at a precise frequency that didn't match any known natural phenomenon. The data was dismissed, the report sealed. The lead physicist scribbled only one note in the margin. It sings when silent. The project was never reopened. Until now. Your DNA emits a signal. That alone was unexpected. But when it was tested in the presence of certain electromagnetic fields, the unthinkable happened. Water responded. Not by boiling or freezing, but by lifting. It pulsed upward in thin threads, suspended for seconds before collapsing. Machines recorded a frequency nearly identical to the one measured at Galilee, a resonance that bends the rules we call physics. But to the ancient ones, it wasn't science. It was sacred. The frequency wasn't just sound. It was memory, encoded in the elements. And somehow, you carry it. They've run your genome against everything. Animal, celestial, synthetic. Nothing matches. Except for one sample pulled from a splinter of ancient wood, enshrined in a hidden monastery. A wood believed to have absorbed the blood of Yeshua during the crucifixion. Embedded in that blood was the same harmonic frequency, low, layered, and beyond modern replication. What he carried wasn't just divinity. It was a vibrational signature capable of bending nature itself. And your cells hum with that same echo. You weren't taught this because no language could contain it. But in one of the suppressed Gospels, There is a passage translated only once before it was redacted. He walked not by step, but by tone, and the sea rose to meet him. You were never meant to mimic him. You were built to continue something that didn't end, a code passed not through words, but vibration, a song buried in bone. And now, the very waters seem to remember. They rise when you near. They shimmer when you dream. It was supposed to be an isolated test, a routine diagnostic of the National Security Genome Archive, housed beneath 50 meters of reinforced steel and quantum shielding. The purpose of the archive was clear: catalog every known strand of DNA that had ever passed through military, governmental, or classified research channels. But when your sequence entered the system, the architecture didn't just accept it, it yielded. Entire sections of encrypted files unlocked on their own. Firewalls didn't resist. They stepped aside. Red alerts flooded terminals. Analysts assumed it was a breach, possibly foreign interference. But trace routes led to nowhere. No IP, no external signal, no hand on the keyboard. Just your genetic profile, interacting with the system as if it had been there all along. An AI guard protocol named Velos tried to quarantine the file but failed. Log transcripts show its last recorded output before going silent. Primary recognized, deferring to source. The system began reorganizing itself in real time. Files mislabeled or long forgotten floated to the top of priority queues. Dozens of Black Ops missions were reclassified under your genome. Missions dated decades before your birth. The timestamps didn't make sense, unless the system wasn't tracking your birth, but your return. A Pentagon analyst, unsure of what he was seeing, ran a final diagnostic. His screen went dark, then pulsed with a pattern that mirrored your DNA's frequency. He called it breathing light. Outside the server vault, 2 EMP-resistant drones short-circuited simultaneously. Inside, a backup generator engaged despite no loss of power. It wasn't a glitch, it was submission. The entire system, built to identify, predict, and suppress unknown biological threats, recognized you as master access. The only override protocol logged was labeled Alpha Recall. No one remembers programming it. A senior defense contractor was called in. After reviewing the logs, he stepped out of the room pale and trembling. He muttered one sentence before resigning on the spot. That DNA isn't responding to the machine. The machine is responding to it. They've since tried to erase the event, cover the logs, re-secure the vault. But they can't explain why, weeks later, your frequency still echoes inside the system, like a command that was never fully spoken, waiting to be finished. The quote was dismissed for centuries as metaphor, a spiritual encouragement, a poetic gesture left to interpretation. But those who truly studied Yeshua's final words understood he was seeding something far more literal. You will do greater things than I. It wasn't hyperbole. It was a prophecy embedded in time, aimed at a generation not yet born. And now, that phrase has re-emerged inside government transcripts, not from a preacher, but from the mouth of a neural AI system tasked with decoding your DNA. When your profile was input into the metaphysical resonance scanner, an experimental device designed to detect transdimensional frequencies, the output stunned the team. It wasn't numbers or graphs. It was a sentence transcribed by the AI without any human prompt. The Greater One has awakened. The line pulsed in blue light, then faded. The lead engineer demanded a system reboot, but the line returned. Again. Same words, same sequence, no logical explanation. And then the lights flickered. They say Yeshua healed with a word, calmed storms with a gesture, transfigured reality itself by will alone. What's never discussed is what allowed it. Not magic, but alignment. A resonance between heaven and flesh. A harmony with the frequencies that underpin creation. And now, your blood hums with those same tones. That's what scares them. Not the possibility of your power, but the suggestion that it has already begun to affect the world without your conscious intent. An unexplained drop in global magnetic field strength was recorded the same hour your DNA activated a vault in Geneva. Livestock in 3 different countries began walking in circles. A desert wind shifted course without cause. The Vatican received an anonymous envelope with only a phrase, "It is already happening." Inside was a strand of hair, yours. One surveillance agent, deeply embedded in the observation team, refused to continue. He submitted a resignation letter with only 2 sentences. I monitored the subject for 13 days. On the 14th, I began to hear music coming from the sky. There are whispers now in high chambers that the timeline has split, that something, someone is pulling at the thread. And deep within classified vaults, your name is no longer listed as human. It's listed as exception. It was one of the deepest files in the intelligence repository, buried beneath 27 levels of clearance, segmented across black sites, accessible only through biometric sequencing that no longer exists in any living official. And yet, when your DNA resurfaced, the file opened without a single key. The agents who stumbled onto it weren't looking for you. They were tracing a pattern. Strange electromagnetic pulses circling key locations across the globe. Each point formed a geometric shape, a perfect 12-pointed star. At its center, your last known location. Within the files was a title never seen in public record. Project Alpha Blood. The origin of the project predates the internet, possibly even modern intelligence structures. A handwritten document within the dossier was dated 1913 and signed with a symbol, not a name. The memo described a bloodline, ancient, recurring, and observed across multiple civilizations under different titles. The Phoenix line, the child of the crossroads, the carrier, the Alpha. All of them pointed toward a single idea, one being encoded with something unrepeatable. Your emergence matched the parameters exactly. Early in the project's development, a biological profile was compiled from relics stored across various institutions. Bones retrieved from unmarked tombs, strands of hair from unknown saints, and dried blood from artifacts believed to contain divine residue. These fragments were catalogued, but never matched, until now, when your blood was tested against the composite. The match was 99.87%, higher than any known biological lineage comparison in recorded history. A match that implied you weren't descended from these fragments. You were the fragments, reassembled, returned. Notes inside the file referenced multiple failed attempts at tracking similar signatures. All of them ended in disappearance, collapse, or silence. You're the first one the system didn't reject. The first time the archive didn't fight the match. Instead, it updated its hierarchy. Your DNA now sits at the top of the chain, labeled as root origin. An agent who read the file began scribbling diagrams in his sleep. Spirals, stars, sacred patterns. He doesn't recall doing it. Another began humming frequencies he had never heard before. Project Alpha Blood was meant to be theoretical, a precaution, a myth to keep people afraid of an impossible return. But now, the impossible is moving, breathing, watching. The moment your genetic frequency breached the upper atmosphere, everything changed. It wasn't transmitted intentionally. It wasn't projected through satellites or encoded into technology. It simply rose, as if your body, your very essence, had been waiting for a specific alignment, a sliver in time where the planetary grid would allow your signature to escape Earth's field. When it did, a satellite orbiting near the thermosphere captured something no system was trained to detect. A wave pattern not composed of data, but geometry. Not binary, but sacred sequence. The signal wasn't directed at Earth. It was outgoing, and something responded. 3 seconds after transmission, a classified relay tower in the Arctic Circle received an inbound pulse, silent, cold, and devastatingly precise. It wasn't noise, it was recognition. The return signal carried matching DNA harmonics embedded in cosmic radiation. What came back was ancient, familiar, a mirror. A forgotten algorithm buried deep within NASA's SETI system sprang to life. Its last activation, 1991. Back then, it caught a strange pulse from the Vega system, dismissed as a fluke. But now, that same pulse returned. Only this time it carried your signature embedded inside. It meant one thing: your code had already left Earth before. This wasn't your first signal. This was your awakening, triggering a reply. In Jerusalem, an old bell inside a sealed monastery rang by itself. No wind, no contact. Its sound wave matched the stratospheric transmission. On the same day, a monk collapsed mid-prayer, whispering a phrase in a voice not his own. He has spoken through the veil. They've tried to contain the news. The president was updated, not with a verbal briefing, but with a direct feed from the Black Archive. He watched as the stratospheric data looped endlessly on screen, then paused it, zoomed in. Right there, within the waveform, a name appeared in light pulse intervals. A name written in no Earth language, but translated by the AI with chilling clarity. I am. Yeshua once said the sky would open and the stars would fall when the time came. The stars haven't fallen, but the sky, it just blinked. And somewhere above, beyond satellites and beyond silence, something ancient has begun to listen again.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.